Well, Mayo, thank you very much. I still am struggling on when to shake hands and when not to shake hands. We are finding our way through that. Chamber members, distinguished guests, a number of legislative colleagues that have joined us here today. Good afternoon, I guess it is now, just as a few minutes ago. But I want to just tell you what an honor it is for me to join you here today, in particular after the last number of months that we have all been dealing with COVID-19, and in particular the last month or so where Saskatchewan most certainly is finding our way through what has been a very tough fourth wave of COVID-19. It is a true honor for me to be here with you today. Let me begin by just saying a quick word of thanks to Jason Abig and the entire Chamber of Commerce here in Saskatoon for putting this event together. Thank you to Nutrien for your sponsorship of this event. It's greatly appreciated. Mayo, I've said this to you privately, but I really do appreciate the opportunity now to be able to say this publicly. Congratulations on your appointment as CEO at Nutrien. I think I speak for everyone in this room and across this province when I say we're thrilled to see someone with your experience and your skill set lead that corporation, but also someone with as an in-depth understanding of the province of Saskatchewan as you have as well. And let me say, Mayo, I do think I also speak on behalf of everyone here today when I say how refreshing it is to see the Chief Executive Officer of Nutrien in Saskatoon and in Saskatchewan as much as we have over the course of the last number of weeks. So thank you and congratulations to you, Mayo. As I said at the outset, ladies and gentlemen, the last number of months, to say that they have been extraordinary is to vastly understate the matter. Not only are we witnessing history here in Saskatchewan and across Canada, we're living through history, a lot of history, in a very short period of time, and it hasn't been easy. It hasn't been easy for all of you, the businesses that create opportunity, that drive growth in our province, and really contribute so very much to this great province. And there has been just a tremendous amount of uncertainty that you've been operating under for far too long now. The pandemic has tested your resolve, it has tested your resilience, and in government we have stepped forward to try to support you where we are able, but ultimately what has made the difference in this province, what has allowed our economy to grow throughout the pandemic and put us in a position for a strong recovery is your grit and your determination. And for that I say thank you. Businesses, big, small, and in between, have been finding ways to survive despite the circumstances that we have faced. And it's one of the main reasons, the people in this province, I think we should all be bullish on our future as we find our way to better days. Ladies and gentlemen, today I'm going to take a little bit of time to talk about why we should be optimistic about that future in Saskatchewan. I want to talk about the progress that we're seeing, even as we deal with significant challenges in this global pandemic. And I want to provide a couple of comments with respect to the upcoming speech from the throne that will be occurring on Wednesday of this week in the Legislative Assembly. I also want to speak about how that speech from the throne will ultimately continue to support building a stronger, a safer, a healthier, a better educated, and a much more independent Saskatchewan. And finally, I want to take the opportunity today to discuss briefly why I think this decade, this coming decade, will be Saskatchewan's decade, and why there's every reason for us to believe that Saskatchewan's best days still lie ahead of us. My friends, we should be hopeful in Saskatchewan. But we also need to be realistic, and we need to understand what the challenges are before us, and today that challenge is COVID-19. In Saskatchewan, as I said, we've been hit hard by a fourth wave of this pandemic, and there are pressures in our healthcare system. And I know you join me in thanking this province's frontline healthcare professionals and all of those that are working behind the scenes that are responding to this pandemic, and in particular responding to this fourth wave of the pandemic. The fact is the number of active COVID cases and the new cases have been falling over the course of the past number of weeks, and that is encouraging for us to see. But our case count in Saskatchewan still does remain high, and that is due to our vaccination rate not being high enough in this province. Most days, when we do the daily case counts, and they're lower today again, but when we do the daily case counts, 75 to 80% of the new cases and hospitalizations are in those that are not vaccinated. Even though vaccinated residents make up the largest proportion of our society, we still have an inordinate number of people in our hospitals and that have COVID that are not vaccinated. And that is why, that large proportion of people that are vaccinated is why we have resisted calls from many to impose more widespread restrictions, to impose potentially lockdowns and ultimately business closures, because we don't think it's fair. And we don't think it's right to impose those sweeping closures, those sweeping restrictions on all of the people when the vast majority of people in this province have went out and done the right thing and they have received their vaccine. In the early days of the pandemic, we didn't have that opportunity. The only tool that we had to address COVID-19 was broad-based restrictions across communities in Saskatchewan, but now with vaccines widely available in every community, in every corner in this province, it doesn't make sense to restrict everyone's activities and take away, ultimately, their personal freedoms. Instead, we have chosen to focus those restrictions on those that have chosen not to be vaccinated through that proof of vaccination system that we have in place. And I know many of you are checking not only your employees, but your patrons as well. And for that, I say thank you. It hasn't been easy, but I say thank you for the effort that you have made, and I'm here to tell you that it's making a difference. It's making a significant difference. It's causing more people to make that choice to go out and get vaccinated. Since we made that announcement in the middle of September, we're up 7% in the province on our first and second doses, a significant increase from where we were in the weeks leading up to that. More than 70,000 people have went out and gotten their first dose, and another 70,000 people have went out and gotten their second dose. 85% of eligible residents now in this province have their first dose. 77% have their second dose and are fully vaccinated, and that is driving down our case numbers in the province. And that occurred shortly after we made that introduction in the middle of September. Since then, and here's the impact. Since then, our 7-day average of new cases is down about 45%. Over the course of roughly the last months, we're down about 45% on our 7-day case count. Our active case count is down about 40%, and it continues to decline. So again, I say thank you. What we are doing is working. It's the reason that we have been able to avoid enacting or imposing more broad-based, widespread restrictions in our communities, because our trajectory is improving, and it's improving greatly. I don't have to tell any of you that we're living through what are very extraordinary times. They're very challenging times. For those of you that manage or operate or own a business, this is unlike anything that we have faced before. But in spite of those challenges, we have seen tremendous progress in this province. And we should just pause to take a look at what is happening in Saskatchewan today. We've seen a recovery. We've seen a recovery in our employment to 99% of pre-pandemic levels. In fact, in September, the rate of job growth was above the national average, while our unemployment rate was below the national average. Exports in this province are up 20% in the first 8 months of this year, and that's building on an already incredible performance in 2020, where we led the nation in export growth. In August, our year-over-year manufacturing sales rose more than 45%, second in the nation. But the strongest indicator of confidence in our recovery, the strongest indicator of confidence in our province is the unprecedented surge of investment that we have seen arrive here over the course of the last number of months. This year alone, during what has been a very challenging year, likely one of our most challenging years, projects over $10 billion have been committed to be invested here in Saskatchewan. Projects that will create thousands of jobs during the construction period, thousands of jobs during their operation, and thousands of jobs across this province for decades to come. We could look at what's just happening in this area, in the Saskatoon area. Just east of the city, we have Northern Nutrients, who's building a $25 million urea fertilizer manufacturing facility. We have Clean Seed, who's going to soon be assembling their Smart Seeder Max S at their new plant in Saskatoon. You just go down the road a short while, you see AGT Foods. Their investment continues with a $65 million investment in their facility in Delisle. We see Ingredion, a Fortune 500 U.S. company, coming in to Saskatchewan for the first time, buying Verdient Foods. These are all projects in sectors where we traditionally have growth in the province, yes, in agriculture and fertilizer. But we're also seeing investment pour into other emerging sectors in this city and in this province as well. In the first half of 2021, for example, venture capital investments in Saskatchewan surpassed $170 million. That sets a new record for annual investment in just the first 6 months of this year. A lot of that money was raised by companies that are based right out of this city in Saskatoon. And we're all familiar with names like Vendasta and Seven Shifts and Coconut Software. These are companies that are literally putting this city and this province on the map in the tech world. Companies that are located, yes, in urban Saskatchewan, but often relying on their roots in rural Saskatchewan. Catherine Renier, for example, the CEO of Coconut Software, most certainly is an example of that. She grew up on a farm near Prudhoe, just north of Saskatoon, and in an interview about a year ago in the Financial Post, many of you may have seen it, Catherine recalled the early days when Coconut Software had lost a significant large contract. The timing for the company, and for Catherine by extension, was terrible. They had just set up an office in Saskatoon, and what was she to do, losing this very large contract? Well, she did what many of us in this province would do. She phoned her mother. In the article, in the interview, she said, "I was bawling my eyes out, and my mom said, 'Catherine, you need to pull yourself together. You can do this. Just figure it out.'" And then her mom ended the call. Catherine thought she likely had to get out to the field to help with whatever was happening that day, and she understood. But folks, is this not that dissimilar of a conversation that happens in this province all the time? Right down to that very succinct piece of advice. Just figure it out. Growing up, I heard that from my father, not once, not twice. I think he might have told me that this week when I was having some particular challenge. Well, Catherine Renier, fortunate for her, fortunate for Coconut Software, and I would say fortunate for Saskatoon and Saskatchewan. She is a very resourceful and resilient person, and man alive, did she figure it out. Earlier this month, Coconut Software has announced that it raised $28 million additional dollars to expand its business line with banks and credit unions. It's absolutely incredible. My friends, the tech sector is growing in Saskatchewan. It's just about to continue to grow even further. It's part of not only the tech sector, I would put forward it's part of your business sector, and for that and this example, we should be so excited. Here's something else that we could be excited about. Over $1 billion, well over $1 billion, invested in the expansion of our canola crushing industry in Saskatchewan. A huge boost to our provincial economy and a huge boost to our province. The Western producer is calling Regina, and I quote, "a smoking hot spot for canola crush plants." Two of the largest agri-food companies in the world, Viterra, Cargill, are building new facilities in the Regina area. A total investment north of $1 billion on those two facilities. Meanwhile, if you go southeast of there to the Ceres facility at Northgate, just southeast of Estevan, an additional $350 million being invested in another canola crush facility there. Move over to Yorkton, just north of Yorkton, Richardson International, also doubling the capacity of their facility that's already been operating there for a number of years. In the plan for growth that we had put out a couple of years ago, we set a goal of ensuring that we could achieve 75% of the province's canola production would then be crushed here in the province. We want those jobs in this province. And with these investments that have been announced, we're going to meet that objective, and we're going to meet it a lot sooner than 2030 and a lot sooner than we had anticipated. In that same plan for growth, we had put forward some very bullish projections with respect to our potash industry. At 2020, at about $5.5 billion in exports, we had put forward a projection that we feel that industry could likely achieve $9 billion by the year 2020, and we're likely going to achieve that goal sooner than we had anticipated as well. In this province, over the course of the last 15 years or so, we've seen more than $20 billion invested in the potash industries by companies like Nutrien, companies like Mosaic. Now K+S has built a mine here. That investment has been to expand, yes, but also to modernize and ensure its competitive and sustainability matrices are there as we go into the future. And today, the potash industry is the most advanced potash industry in the world. It's the most efficient in the world, and it's the most sustainable potash industry in the world, supporting over 6,000 families in this province, and for that, we are appreciative. The companies, Nutrien, Mosaic, K+S are exemplary corporate citizens, and we're seeing that here today. And they most certainly are making our province stronger. Ladies and gentlemen, that is the industry that we have as we know it today. That is the foundation that we see now a company like BHP is now building on as it moves into Saskatchewan with their $12 billion investment at Jansen, the largest single sector investment that this province has ever seen, and the largest single sector investment that BHP as a company has seen. 3,500 construction jobs, 600 full-time jobs in this city and at the mine site on completion. A company that makes community engagement every bit as important and a priority like Nutrien, like Mosaic, and like K+S. So once again, I want to take this opportunity to thank all of the potash companies that have operated in this province and have most certainly made our communities and our province better, stronger, and attracted people to live here. So I want to take the opportunity as well to thank you, Mayo, and thanks to everyone that works in the potash industry for not only what you give back to our communities, but for the faith that you have had in this province as Nutrien, as Mosaic, as K+S, as a potash industry collectively in making Saskatchewan a leader in the world when it comes to sustainable, affordable fertilizer production. And thank you. Again, over the course of this past year, and what admittedly has been one of our most challenging years that this province has faced, there are so many other investments for us to look at and talk about and ultimately be excited about. We see in Regina the first wheat straw pulp facility, $350 million project, creating 110 new jobs. The Grants group of companies, hiring an additional 1,000 people, bringing their workforce up to 4,400 people, and congratulations to the Brandt group of companies that has recently bought service equipment. Let me just finish up by talking a little bit about another industry that maybe at times flies under the radar, and I find that curious as to why it flies under the radar, because it's an industry that is doing very, very well, and that's the forestry industry. In 2020, last year, we produced about $1.1 billion worth of forest products. That was up 30% year over year. 2021 is shaping up to be an even stronger year in the forestry industry, an industry that supports about 8,000 jobs in this province. But we're just getting started in that industry as well. We are on the cusp of what will be the largest expansion in the forestry industry that this province has ever seen. About $1 billion has been committed to projects that are going to create a further 3,000 jobs in this industry. The Prince Albert Pulp Mill has been closed since 2006. 2006 was the last time my beloved Edmonton Oilers were in the Stanley Cup final. They lost to the Hurricanes that year, the Carolina Hurricanes, in 7 games. They almost made it. 15 years later, only 2 Oilers attendances in the playoffs at all over those 15 years. That mill in Prince Albert is still closed. This has been a frustrating time for people that live in the city of Prince Albert, the surrounding area. It's been a frustrating time for Oilers fans. But that wait will be over soon. And not to tie my Oilers' success to the success of the pulp mill, but we are 5-0, and I believe we're leading the league, or tied at the moment. But in addition to that, and more important than that, Paper Excellence has plans to invest over $500 million to upgrade the mill, which is expected to reopen in 2023, creating more than 1,600 jobs. Meanwhile, we see Dunkley Lumber and Carrot River. We have Carrier Forest Products and Big River. Both are upgrading their sawmills in each of those communities. And we see One Sky Forest Products, a new entrant into the Saskatchewan forestry industry, planning to build a $250 million OSB plant north of Prince Albert, creating another 700 jobs. It's worth noting as well, with respect to One Sky Forest Products, they're moving forward in partnership with a number of First Nations communities and First Nations organizations. Nearly, in fact, in Saskatchewan, and this is one of the items that we really need to talk about more. But in Saskatchewan, we lead the nation when it comes to Indigenous engagement in our forestry industry. Nearly 30% of the workforce in Saskatchewan's forestry industry is Indigenous, far ahead of any other province in the nation of Canada. Beyond that, nearly over 30% of the provincial timber supply is also allocated to Indigenous businesses. No province even comes close to that percentage, not even close. Ladies and gentlemen, this is an example of economic reconciliation in action. If this province is truly going to move forward, we need to ensure that Indigenous people are full and active participants in the economy. The forestry industry has been doing that for decades now, and now we see many, many other industries, including the potash industry, that is doing this and doing it in spades. So that's some of what is happening in this province in what has been one of our most difficult years. Imagine what we can do when we find our way through this pandemic. Imagine what we can achieve in this province together once we get to the other side of these challenges that we currently are dealing with. On Wednesday, as I said, we're going to release our speech from the throne, and we'll outline a number of initiatives that are going to help us to build on the momentum that we see in the economy today and some of what I have spoken about. A number of initiatives that are, quite frankly, going to improve the quality of life for all of us in Saskatchewan and create opportunities for our young people, that next generation, to ensure that they can enjoy the Saskatchewan that we feel we can build for them. You're going to see some familiar themes, of course: renewed commitment to infrastructure, public infrastructure. I talked a lot about private investment, but we need public infrastructure to ensure that private investment is attracted here and people move here. Since 2007, and we had the honor of forming government, $37 billion is the amount that we have invested in public infrastructure. That's to upgrade and improve our roads. That's to build overpasses at Martensville and Warman. That's to build Jim Pattison Children's Hospital here in Saskatoon, overpasses in the city of Saskatoon. That's significant investment that is very, very crucial to helping us attract those projects that we want to attract to our province. But there's more work to do, and so we have made renewed commitments around the investment as we look forward to the year 2030. Another $30 billion we will invest publicly between now and 2030 in schools, in hospitals, and in the infrastructure that we need to attract investment to our communities, but also to ensure that our communities are places where people that want to work in those industries want to live. We also plan to continue to offer very targeted incentives to a number of industries to ensure that we are doing everything we can to attract those jobs and that opportunity into our province. I mentioned earlier the growth in the tech sector. We've already extended the Saskatchewan Technology Startup Incentive another 5 years. We have incentives in place to encourage exploration of base metals, of precious metals, of diamonds, all opportunities that lie before us in this province. We've invested $31 million to build a rare earth element processing facility right here in Saskatoon. Construction of that is underway, and that facility should be operational next year, and we're going to build another mining industry in this province. We'll be enhancing the Saskatchewan value-added agricultural incentive to continue to build on the substantial growth that we're already seeing with the canola crush investments as well as others. There is going to be a helium action plan that will be announced soon. Now, I just want to be clear, I'm not announcing that program today. I was just going to float that trial balloon out there and see how it goes. And that's a terrible joke. One that I'm sure the helium industry is sick of. But the reality is helium isn't just for balloons. Helium is a very, very important product in medical research. It's used as a semiconductor in manufacturing, fiber optics, as well as in nuclear power generation. And Saskatchewan, we happen to have very large deposits of helium, and investment is already flowing into this sector, and this is exciting. For example, North American Helium has invested $32 million in their helium purification facility. And our goal is to work with the industry to ensure that our province of Saskatchewan produces 10% of the world's helium by the year 2030, and that's achievable, it's attainable, and we're going to make every effort to get there. We're also continuing with the incentives that are increasing jobs in our energy industry. And yes, we talk about the energy industry in Saskatchewan. For example, earlier this year, Husky Midstream became the first company to complete a project under the Oil Infrastructure Investment Program. The company invested $82 million in our province. It created 450 construction jobs, and it expanded its gathering facility near Spruce Lake, Saskatchewan. Ladies, our growth plan puts out very, very concise goals with respect to oil production in this province. We're at about 440,000 barrels a day today, and we want to grow that to 600,000 barrels by the year 2030. That's sustainably produced Saskatchewan oil. In fact, if the rest of the world produced energy, produced oil in the way that we do here in Saskatchewan, global emissions from oil production would be reduced by 25% overnight. That is how sustainable our energy industry is here in this province. When it comes to energy production, we'll continue to take, yes, an all-and-above approach to how we produce that in Saskatchewan. We're investing in renewables, yes. We've invested in wind power. Our province's largest solar facility just came online a number of days ago, but we cannot do this at the expense of our baseload power capacity. We're building, yes, new natural gas power plants, one coming at Moose Jaw, to provide that baseload electricity at an affordable price to back up those renewables for our communities and our industries in this province. And as long as we hold the privilege of forming government here in Saskatchewan, forming your government, the province will have dependable, secure, affordable supply of power for all of us to use. And that is why we are moving forward quite ambitiously with the conversation and ultimately procurement of small modular reactors in Saskatchewan. We have signed a memorandum of understanding some time ago with the provinces of Alberta, Ontario, and New Brunswick to further the research partnerships around SMRs. Cameco has been very active in this area. As Cameco, a Saskatchewan-based company, is aiming to be the fuel supplier of choice for SMRs in the future, and quite likely will be. In Saskatoon, we have the Sylvia Fedoruk Centre for Nuclear Innovation, which is at the forefront of advancing some of this SMR research. Folks, we simply cannot meet the challenge of reducing our emissions profile here in the province, providing that affordable baseload power without looking at nuclear power and without having a very serious look at nuclear power. The world needs steady, reliable baseload electricity, but it's imperative, yes, that we cut our emissions and cut them substantially, and that doesn't leave us with a lot of options in this province. Nuclear is our largest opportunity, and most importantly, it is a source of clean, carbon-free baseload power. Ladies and gentlemen, in this speech from the throne, you'll also see a continued commitment to research. We continue to support our Crop Development Centre at the University of Saskatchewan, our Vaccine and Infectious Disease Organization, or VITO, as we know it. We've invested over $15 million to support the initiatives at VITO in not only pandemic vaccine research, but now development of those vaccines and ultimately the manufacturing of those vaccines for not only animals but also humans as we move forward. And thanks, now we see some private investment moving into that space, and for that we are appreciative. Mayo mentioned GIFTS, of the Global Institute for Food Security. We just announced just over $3 million to support a new engineering biology center at GIFTS. And Mayo, I would reiterate, we are so very thankful for Nutrient's involvement in GIFTS, and I think there is much opportunity as to what the Global Institute for Food Security will do for this province in the years ahead. Everything I've described thus far you can put into one category, which is really the broad category of growth measures for our industries and for our opportunity. Actions we're taking to ensure that our economy continues to expand, continues to grow, continues to create opportunity not only for us, but create opportunity for that next generation and generate the revenues to support the quality of life that we've come to expect in Saskatchewan. We need, for example, a growing economy if we're going to continue to invest in healthcare. And we are investing in healthcare. I mentioned the Jim Pattison Children's Hospital a short time ago, but we're also investing now in Saskatoon and Regina, and you'll see in the months ahead the start of planning and construction for what is called urgent care centers in these two communities. What these centers are is they are aimed at reducing the wait times that we have in our emergency rooms. They'll provide an alternative level of care for illnesses and injuries that are not considered life-threatening, but do require immediate attention. They fall between that family practitioner and the emergency room so that we can alleviate some of the pressures in our emergency rooms. We continue to plan for new facilities in Prince Albert and Weyburn. We're looking at long-term care facilities in La Ronge and Grenfell, and now a large one in Regina. We need to focus on that growing economy if we're going to continue to invest in education in this province, and we are investing in education. Last week we opened a new school in Weyburn. Schools under construction here in Saskatoon, in Regina, in Moose Jaw, in Carrot River, Laloche, Blaine Lake, and in Lanigan. And finally, ladies and gentlemen, we need a growing economy so that we have the resources to continue to keep our communities safe. Overall crime rates in this province are down, but here's the challenge. Violent crime and property crime in many areas are not down, they're up. And this situation is, quite frankly, unacceptable, and it needs to change. In the speech from the throne, you're going to see a number of measures, enhanced law enforcement measures to address crime, particularly in the areas of drug, repeat offender, and property crime. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we understand that a robust law enforcement response that's just one aspect of an effective crime reduction program or an effective crime reduction effort. We understand that addictions in many cases fuel this criminal behavior, and that's why the government is also alongside going to make a historic investment to support those people that are struggling with addictions, and we want to support them in their rehabilitation. Last year, we saw an investment in an addiction center in Estevan. It opened with 30 beds. 15 of those beds were focused on those that are rehabilitating from crystal meth addictions. In the coming months, we are going to actively and ambitiously explore other opportunities to increase not only treatment but detox spaces across this province. And soon, very soon, you are also going to see the launch of 3 new community wellness buses that are going to provide mental health and addictions supports in our communities. Those same supports will also be available at the aforementioned urgent care centers. My friends, this is just a little bit of a preview of what we're going to see Wednesday in the speech from the throne. You're going to hear a lot more about it Wednesday and the days after that. This is some of what your government plans to do to support Saskatchewan's recovery, why we are so ambitious in supporting that recovery so that we can build ultimately a better Saskatchewan for everyone. So let me close with this. Many people have said that the world will never be the same after this pandemic, and I suppose to an extent that's true. We're going through what is a very challenging situation that will reshape how we live our lives. It'll reshape and it'll reorder really how some of the priorities that we have in our lives. But there are some things that just simply will not change. There are some immutable facts. And among them is this: the world's population continues to grow. I think Mayo would mention that. And the world also continues to get richer. A few months ago, Credit Suisse, they released an annual report on global wealth, and here's what it revealed. The number of people in the world with wealth between $10,000 and $100,000 US has more than tripled over the course of the last 20 years to 1.7 billion people. The report also states this: this reflects the growing prosperity of emerging economies and the expansion of the middle class in the developing world. Here's Saskatchewan's opportunity. Today, 1 person escapes extreme poverty every second, and 5 people a second are entering the middle class. Let's repeat that. 1 person escapes extreme poverty every second, and 5 people enter the middle class each and every second. This is Saskatchewan's opportunity. That is why I am so optimistic about the future of our province, and why I hope that you are as well. The source of this province's wealth originates with our exports. And now we have 5 more people to export to each and every second that passes. People who are better off, they want more food, particularly protein. Well, Saskatchewan can provide that food. We are a global agricultural powerhouse. We have more than 40% of Canada's arable land. People who are better off, they want more energy. Well, Saskatchewan is an absolute leader in the production of not only sustainable oil, but we sit on one of the largest high-grade uranium deposits in the world, and we have companies that are bringing that uranium to the world. People who are better off, they want more fertilizer so that they can grow their own food. We have that covered as well. Saskatchewan is home to more than 40% of the world's potash reserves, and now we have great companies like Nutrien, like Mosaic, like K+S, and now BHP that are going to bring that fertilizer to the world. People in developing countries also increasingly want what I call know-how, innovation. They want better ways of doing things, and you can find that here as well. We're a leader in crop science. We are a leader in nuclear science. We're a leader in carbon capture and storage and enhanced oil recovery. And increasingly, we're a leader in information technology. Ladies and gentlemen, the pandemic has slowed the growth in Saskatchewan, yes, and it's slowed that growth around the world. But the fundamentals of the global economy have not changed, and the world is starting to rev its economic engine, and Saskatchewan has precisely what it wants. We have the food, we have the fuel, we have the fertilizer, increasingly we have the innovation, and we have the most important element, and that's the people. Hardworking, determined, and ready to build a future that is absolutely bursting with promise and opportunity. We have the most strong and sturdy foundation that I think we have ever had. We have all of the tools, despite the challenges that we may face today. We have all of the tools to build a stronger, a safer, a healthier, a better educated, and a more independent Saskatchewan. We can build the Saskatchewan that we all desire. Thank you very much for coming here today. Have a great week.
Thank you, Mr. Premier, for your remarks this afternoon. And thank you for your steady hand on our province's economy at this challenging time. Saskatchewan is well positioned to weather the current storm and emerge stronger than our neighbors to the east and west. Recent investments and the exciting new opportunities you touched on today are evidence of that. And thank you very much.
Thanks, Graham.
Mr. Premier, do you have a few moments for some questions?
Sure.
Members of the media, the Premier will be available for questions after the Q&A at the back left of the room. First question, Mr. Premier, is employers across the province are ready to recover, but they can't find people to fill key roles to get growing again. What is the province's plan to, first, spur training and upskilling of current workers, second, increase the participation of Indigenous peoples in our workforce, and thirdly, increase the flow of skilled international workers into our province?
Well, we do have some challenges that lie before us. As I said, we're at 99% of our pre-pandemic employment levels today. And then I just went through a list of about $10 billion of infrastructure investment that is coming into this province. We have industries that want to expand, to capitalize on the opportunities that I have mentioned over the course of the last number of minutes here. And so we do have a challenge coming, and it is a challenge of growth. This is one that we have experienced at numerous times over the course of the last 15 years, and I would put forward that we are going to have that challenge again over the course of the next number of years if we are truly going to achieve and build this province that we desire to do so. And so there are a number of things that I would just touch on. One is we are actively looking at the training opportunities that we have in this province and how we can transition and upgrade people's opportunity so that they can find even a better career than maybe they already have. And so we're looking at what can we do to ensure that the training opportunities that we have in Saskatchewan are accessible to everyone and are meeting the needs of what we are going to require in 3 years and 5 years and in 10 years here in this province. And it may be somewhat different than what we have required over the last 5 or 10 years. And so we're working with industries right now in our training institutes on how we can ultimately do that. And I would say give us your input on what you see that your industry, your business is going to need in the next number of years. We want that input, and it helps us in these conversations to ensure that we have the trained people in the province that we ultimately need. We're going to have to get back to attracting people here again. Our immigration policy is going to, and I've had open conversations with our ministers with respect to our immigration policy, which has been has pulled back the last number of years for obvious reasons the last year and a half. But as we look ahead, we are going to have to be actively looking at recruiting people from other areas of Canada, other areas of North America, and other areas of the world to ensure that we have the labor force that we ultimately are going to need into the future. The last and probably most important, well, not the last, but one of the most important initiative on how are we going to meet the challenge of a qualified workforce here in Saskatchewan is keeping people here. We don't pull any punches with respect to things like the graduate retention program, where you get a tax rebate if you stay and work in the province of Saskatchewan that ultimately will pay for the bulk, if not all, of your tuition. And we want to continue to look at opportunities like that so that we can keep our best and brightest, our Saskatchewan kids right here in the province. And if you have suggestions how we can go further with programs just like that, we're open to that as well. But we make, let's call it what it is. With all of the investments that have been announced, we are going to have a good challenge, but it is going to be a challenge of growth here in the province again, and a challenge of finding, qualified and enough people to do the work that we ultimately are going to need done over the next number of years.
Thank you, Mr. Premier. This was a property tax reassessment year in Saskatchewan, where many commercial and industrial property owners saw dramatic increases, some as much as 3 or 4 times their previous assessment. Would the province be open to change the model, like shortening the assessment cycle for commercial or industrial, like in other provinces, to avoid these wild swings in assessment?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, and I know there's some communities that are doing that already. They're moving forward with their assessments. Rather, I believe it's every 5 years. They're moving forward every 2 years, or obviously at a cost to them for that additional assessment. But they've moved forward to prevent some of those large changes. And this is another challenge as we move forward. Is your property in Saskatchewan is becoming more valuable as we find our way through. But I've heard with respect to some of the assessment process that that needs to be looked at. We'll always take that advice, look at what's possible, and work with people to find our best way through.
Thank you. Expanding Saskatchewan's presence abroad and opening trade offices was identified as a priority in Saskatchewan's growth plan, and it's already underway. How will we know when this move has been successful, and what return on investments are we expecting from the opening of these offices?
Well, those offices have already been involved, and just even by their announcement with some of the investment attraction that has arrived here this year. They're not just export offices, they're export and investment attraction offices, and we've had a $10 billion in private investment just over the course of this past summer that has arrived and been committed to come into Saskatchewan. It's in the potash industry, it's in the ag value-added industry, it's in the forestry industry, it's in the technology industry, it's in the fertilizer placement, production industry on the nitrogen side. The investment has been tremendous, and we feel we're just setting pace. And so the offices that we have abroad are not only there to support our export activities, and we are currently putting together our export plan, our on-the-ground plan between our trade minister, Jeremy Harrison. Bronwyn is here today, putting our energy and mining minister, putting together our plan and which markets we're going to be in the next 6, 12, and 18 months, ensure that we're in those markets with our companies that are exporting into those markets in this province so that we can support them in their conversations with their customers, which around the world quite often are government related or governments themselves, to provide that credibility to the greatest degree that we can as a provincial government, and ultimately attract further investment into this province. And so they're twofold. How you measure success, they're part of a broader effort and a broader initiative. I mentioned a number of very specific tax incentives that we have to attract people here. There's our offices abroad. There's the trade missions that our ministers do. All of this comes together to attract that investment, create those jobs, ultimately grow our exports, grow our wealth in this province. How you measure that is by just that. If we're growing, if our economy is growing and strengthening, and the spin-off from all of those export dollars is landing in our communities, in the retail trade, in the auto dealers that we have, everyone else that operates in our communities, you just measure it as a measure of growth, I suppose.
Thank you. I believe we have time for one more question. The province's $2.6 billion deficit is the big number on everyone's mind. We have heard the commitment to balance the budget by 2026-27, but it's contingent on revenue projections hitting the mark. In your view, are the province's revenue targets still realistic?
Yes, and actually what we're seeing is a challenge in agriculture with our crop insurance programs that we have. Will provide some, this year, pressure on our budget, as everything is included now. But we're also seeing some positives in the way of the energy price, for example, which has been strengthening for a number of months now, and continues to look good for the short to medium term. Listen, as we look ahead, there has been substantial cost, and it shows on the provincial government's books in supporting businesses, in supporting people, in supporting our healthcare system, in supporting our education system throughout this COVID pandemic, and those will continue for some period of time after. But we do need to look at the cost side of the ledger in government as we move forward through the next number of years, and we will be looking at the cost side of the ledger through the next number of years. The opportunity that Saskatchewan has, and this is an opportunity for the Saskatchewan government as well, but I would say is the larger opportunity is for each and every one of us that live here, is being in the position that we are in as we see the commodity strength as the world starts to, as I say, rev its economic engine. Saskatchewan is so very well poised to participate in a global economic recovery. We have exactly what the world is going to need, and we have the opportunity to provide that in a way that is sustainable not only from an environmental perspective, but sustainable from the perspective of supply chain management, which is proving to be a challenge and pushing inflation in some sectors beyond what we thought would happen. But Saskatchewan just checks all of the boxes. We produce the highest quality products, whether it's fertilizer, whether it's canola oil, whether it's timber. We produce the highest quality products in the world. We do so at a competitive price. We produce those products as sustainable as anywhere else in the world can do. And increasingly, we do it in an area where there is a sustainability of governance, sustainability of the regulation with which you operate, and sustainability of supply. We can take some of the kinks out of the supply chain management that is happening with some of our competitors around the world. So the opportunity to provide the world with the food, fuel, the fertilizer, and increasingly the knowledge in the months and years ahead, from this province, from my perspective, from this province's perspective, it is very well could be one of the largest opportunities that has ever been presented to us, and we're going to do everything that we can to ensure that we capitalize on it to the greatest degree on behalf of the people that we represent, which is you in this room and the rest of the people in this province.
Thank you. So looking at the time, it looks like that's all we have time for this afternoon. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking the Premier for his insights this afternoon.
Okay. Everybody ready? How about her?
Okay. Premier, well, you spoke about the strength of Saskatchewan growing after the pandemic. We were very much still in the pandemic.
Great.
Now, our testing has dropped, and ICU admissions and hospital admissions continue to look to increase. So my question is, you said you'll help a lot and look to develop the businesses. What will you do to help business leaders who are asking, sometimes begging for more restrictions to ease the load?
Yeah, so, as you know, and just maybe just correct a little bit of the premise of the question, and I mentioned in the speech, our active cases in the province are down 40%. Our 7-day average is down 45%. My understanding is today's numbers are again going to continue that trend of reducing, the numbers of COVID that we're experiencing here in the province. Our hospitalizations also are down. Our ICUs are continuing to be fairly steady, but admittedly at far too high of level. That's why we moved forward with the measures that we did in the middle of September, the indoor masking measures, as well as the proof of vaccination measure that I think, if you look at where the numbers are today, down 45% on our rolling 7-day average, those measures are proving to be ultimately effective. So that is where we are at today. We have always made every effort to support, those that are providing the services in healthcare to those that have COVID and those that are accessing healthcare for other reasons as well. Right today, we have, 480 nurses that are providing care in our ICU beds here in the province. We're appreciative of the support that we've now received from the federal government. I understand 6 additional ICU nurses are on the ground today. We're looking at further ways to support that ICU capacity, in particular in the way of our critical care nurses that are operating there. There's a number that are completing their training, whether it be new training or whether it be upgrading their qualifications. I believe about another 60 or 70 critical care nurses that will be completing that training in the weeks ahead to further support our 480 nurses that are providing that intensive care capacity here in the province. And so, as we look ahead, our numbers are starting to decrease. We would hope that is going to arrive in our hospitalization and ultimately our ICU numbers in the days and weeks ahead. In the meantime, we need to continue to support those that are providing that care in our hospitals today, and we are doing that.
What was your message to a woman named Jessica Bailey? She has about 1% kidney function left. She's waiting for a transplant. She can't get it because hospitals are overwhelmed.
Well, this is precisely why we are making every effort to expand the critical care nurses, for example, those that are being redeployed and upgrading their training to operate in so that they can provide care in our ICUs here in the province. This is exactly why we have, worked closely with Ontario to move about 9 patients thus far out of the province so that we can, as quickly as possible, return to a much more normal level of service here in the province. This is why in the middle of September we had put in place a number of additional measures, including the proof of vaccination measure, to ensure that our numbers will go down and we can return to a more normal operation in our healthcare system, and our numbers are starting to decrease, and so that is a positive.
Hospitalizations lag. They're about 2 weeks behind case numbers. We've seen case numbers rising for a long time. They're starting to come down now, yes, but healthcare workers I'm speaking to are still very worried, scared about what's coming through those doors in the next few weeks.
Yeah.
Nurses will help, but they won't solve anything. What will you do to help ICUs?
Well, I just explained what we've done. We have about 70 nurses that are coming out of training that will be available in our ICU departments. We've requested help from the federal government. They've provided about 6 critical care nurses. But ultimately, to your question, numbers are decreasing. They've been decreasing since, for about 4 weeks now. Our numbers are down. Our 7-day rolling average is down about 45%. That is a positive, and that's an indication that the measures that we introduced are working. Our vaccination rates are up about 7% on both first doses and second doses. We've seen about 70,000 people go out and get their first dose, about 70,000 additional people go out and get their second dose. And so we have increased our vaccination rate here in the province, which is a positive, as we look ahead. So the measures are working. Our numbers are going down. Our hospitalizations have also dropped substantially, but our ICUs have not dropped to this date. That is the slowest number to drop, and we're hopeful that that will also decrease in the days ahead. But in the meantime, we're providing the supports to the degree that we can. Yes.
Just regarding, what's the state of military in the province, and how many more people are going to be transferred out, as well as who's covering the cost of this?
The costs will be covered by the government of Saskatchewan on transfers. Listen, there's transfers that do happen even under normal circumstances for various surgeries and such, and so there is, protocol in place for folks to be transferred, ultimately Saskatchewan patients to be transferred, and how we can support 1 or 2 family members in being near their family member when they're transferred to another area. And so there are protocols in place on how this occurs, but ultimately the cost will be borne by the government of Saskatchewan, and this is part of a short-term effort to free up some of the services and to support our healthcare workers, and ultimately support all of those that require access to our ICU in particular, in this case, whether they have COVID or whether they're need that ICU care for another reason.
And how many are being transferred out?
I believe there's been 9 to date. I believe they've looking at doing another 9, and then they'll have a decision at that point in time.
Another 9 by when do those numbers?
This week.
So a total 18
Correct.
by week's end.
And so infectious disease expert Nazim Mohajireen says a request for assistance should have been put in a month ago.
With who?
The federal assistance.
And they were put in, and listen, here's maybe where we should, have a conversation, where the resources lie. I said in Saskatchewan we have 480 critical care nurses that are providing care in our 135 odd beds, ICU beds that we have here in this province. The provinces are where the resources lie. The federal government just simply doesn't have the resources to match any of what any province has. That's why we have been discussing with other provinces as to what resources they have. That's how we came to the conclusion that we were able to transfer a number of our patients from Saskatchewan into Ontario, because they do have the resources. They have over 2,000 ICU beds in Ontario. The federal government, on the request, was able to provide 6 ICU nurses. That is ultimately what we need, is that critical care nurse support in our ICUs. much has been made about the request and when it should be made to the federal government. The fact of the matter is that the vast majority of the critical care resources, whether it be human resources, ventilators, equipment, whatever that might be, is in the provincial realms in the province. And that's why through our Provincial Emergency Operations Center, our Joint Command Center, we are working very closely, yes, with the federal government, and we're appreciative of the critical care nurses they've provided, but we're also working very closely with the other provinces where there are substantially larger numbers of resources as well.
In that time that your government waited to ask the federal government for help, more than 100 people died from COVID, and overall over 800 people have died. What do you say to their families and loved ones?
Well, this is a very challenging pandemic here, not only in the province of Saskatchewan, but it's a challenging pandemic across Canada and ultimately around the world. And that is why we have made every effort. And in particular, Saskatchewan is challenged with this fourth wave, but we've made every effort to expand our ICU capacity to, yes, address some of the pressures that we have from COVID-19, largely from folks that have not received their vaccine. About 75 to 80% of folks that are in our ICUs are folks that have not received the vaccine. But we've provided every effort to ensure that we also have that ICU capacity to address the other folks that also require health care and may require an ICU bed as well. Obviously, that has been very challenged over the course of the last week or 10 days. I addressed that last week, where the measures that we have put in place in mid-September are proving to be quite effective. Our 7-day rolling case number is down 45% from our peak in late September. But should have we moved sooner with those measures? I think it's fair to say we should have.
Today, the government said that there's monoclonal antibody treatments available for people who don't have the COVID vaccine. You previously said that you're looking for non-mRNA vaccines. Do you not think that contributes to vaccine hesitancy?
Not at all. Listen, what we're looking at is using every tool that we have available to keep people out of hospital. Monoclonal antibodies is one of those tools that is being utilized in a number of states and ultimately is keeping a certain number of people out of hospital, and we're going to make that available to Saskatchewan people starting today. We've made self-rapid tests available in communities right across this province, so that if you feel you've been exposed, you can very quickly get a self-rapid test and check whether you have actually been infected with COVID. This is part of our strategy here in the province. In the early days, in the first number of months, probably 8-10 months of this pandemic, up until the end of 2020, the only tool we had was public health measures to do these sweeping, broad-based shutdowns of areas of our community and restrict people's movements and restrict their access. Since then, we have vaccines, which are proving to be the most effective tool that we have in battling not only COVID-19 but preventing people from going in ultimately into a hospital. We have now monoclonal antibodies. We have broad-based self-rapid tests that are available. All of these we're going to make available to Saskatchewan people to ultimately keep as many as we can out of hospital. And the non-mRNA vaccines as well. That's come by request, multiple requests from organizations and people in the province. And if we can make that available, and that will increase our vaccination rate even further, above the 140,000 people that have went out and got their vaccine since we made the announcement. We want there to be as few of barriers in the way as possible for people to make the right decision.
Premier, Minister Haidu tweeted on September 24th that she spoke to Paul Merriman, saying the federal government would help out. The federal government told Global News they only received a request for help on October 18th. You said you could have reacted sooner to the fourth wave. What took so long? Why the time?
What I said, how we could have reacted sooner to the fourth wave was to move a couple of weeks sooner with respect to the measures that we had put in place as we, look at how effective, in particular in hindsight, when we look at how effective those measures are being in reducing our numbers here in the province. We're down 45% in our 7-day running average. With respect to the request from the federal government, it's a request that flows through our Emergency Operations Center, and so when they make that request, we obviously flow that through. In this case, I believe it went through the Minister of Health to the federal minister for the request for critical care nurses specifically, of which they've provided 6. We'll add that to the 480 that we have operating here now. It isn't going to make, I would say, a significant difference, but I think at this juncture, every difference matters, and so we're very appreciative of the federal government's 6 critical care nurses.
And on top of the help from the federal government and other provinces, for help, maybe from the States or something like that? Because there was something.
You know, I don't know what conversations happened maybe this morning at our Joint Command Center. I don't know. Are they coming out for a briefing today? That would be a question for them, as I'm not sure if they've been in touch officially requesting assistance from other jurisdictions. I would say that through our Emergency Operations Center, they're constantly in touch with other provinces, maybe not requesting assistance, but understanding what assistance may be available should we need it. And this is not new to Saskatchewan's challenge with this fourth wave. If we look back in earlier months of the pandemic, Saskatchewan actually accepted patients from, I believe, Manitoba, and I'm not sure if we brought in some patients from Ontario as well in the earlier months of the pandemic, where we actually did have the capacity here in Saskatchewan, and other areas of Canada were very challenged with that capacity. And so, fortunately, we live in a nation where we're able to rely on one another as provinces and territories for that type of help. Unfortunately, here in the fourth wave, it's been Saskatchewan's turn to receive some of that assistance.
Right, and despite renewed calls for more restrictions from Dr. Shahab and many other doctors from across the province, you're saying that no more restrictions will be put in place. Can you tell us what will it take for us to get more restrictions? Because right now we are over 100 people have died over the course of this month, and we have outbreaks almost every day in schools. What will it take for more restrictions?
Well, the restrictions that Dr. Shahab has openly discussed are with respect to household gathering sizes, and if you look at where the trajectory of our cases are today, it's dropping, and it's dropped. Our 7-day rolling case average is down 45% from its peak less than a month ago, and so the measures that are in place are proving to be effective. They're dropping our caseloads here in the province, and ultimately, as that caseload drops, we should see our hospitalizations, which are already dropping as well, but ultimately our ICU cases dropping as well. So the measures that are in place are effective. They're working. If we were to see a change in that trajectory, then we would have a look at all of the tools that we have available. What is the uptake, for example, on the monoclonal antibodies that we're providing? What is, do we have to look at additional public health measures, of which Dr. Shahab has indicated the next additional public health measure would ultimately be something around household restrictions. But as long as our cases are continue to drop, and the measures that we have in place are seeming to be quite effective, which they are, I don't think it's the time to be looking at additional additional public health measures.
Cases are dropping, but so is testing, and our wastewater studies show a surge, so it's not entirely clear. Cases are dropping as well.
Yeah, the PCR testing is dropping as we've changed that to be symptomatic, much like some other provinces have done months ago. But at the same time, we've deployed literally a couple million tests out in the communities right across this province, rapid self-tests, where folks are able to, go and get one should they need one, think they are not feeling well that day, or think they may have been exposed to someone that had COVID-19. It's really the pre-screening before you would ultimately, go in for a PCR test. And so, the testing capacity across the province, when you include our rapid self-tests that are there, are rapid tests and other tests that are being provided by private providers, of which we indicated we were moving towards a number of weeks ago, probably months ago. Not all of those are counted as day-to-day tests, but they're most certainly out there, and they're being utilized in schools, they're being utilized in communities, and ultimately being utilized by Saskatchewan residents. And so there would be far more tests that are being performed today and in the days ahead than what is actually recorded by the public PCR tests that are there for those folks that either have a positive rapid test or are symptomatic. And other provinces have mirrored that policy. I'd point to Nova Scotia had moved to this type of a testing strategy last year.
When local news asks you or Mr. Merriman to comment, those comment requests are forwarded to the SPSA or the PEOC. Yet when my colleagues and I ask questions of the PEOC on the briefings, they say we need to ask political leaders.
Yeah, okay.
So who is responsible for
Well, it depends what your question is. What's your question? You know, there's questions that I think the political leaders should answer, but then there's also, you know, detailed operational questions that I think the Provincial Emergency Operations Center is best poised to answer. And I don't participate in those meetings each and every day. However, myself and likely more so the health minister are briefed on, you know, their direction each and every day. So there's questions for either. So if you you know, ask the question, and we'll direct you if it's, you know, I'll either answer it if I can, or if it's something that is more suited, as we had a question earlier, to the Provincial Emergency Operations Center. I think that's a more suitable place for that question to be asked.
So the deployment of the military does seem to be a new milestone here.
Six critical care nurses from the military, yes.
What do you say to someone who looks at that, they go, my government's failed me, and this is a symbol of it. What do you say to that?
Well, you know, and I said, you know, last week with respect to the measures that we have in place, they are proving to be effective, and we should have moved sooner with those particular measures. With respect to, you know, the 6 individuals, the 6 people, the 6 critical care nurses that are coming, landing in Saskatchewan to help our 480 critical care nurses that are already on the ground here. You know, we're appreciative of that effort and of that initiative, but as we've always said, the resources to provide care in healthcare do not lie with the federal government, quite frankly. They lie with provinces. And so, you know, the fact that we have been able to move 9 so far, not 9 patients so far out to the province of Ontario, you know, for that we're forever grateful. That we provided that opportunity for Manitoba earlier, Manitoba bringing patients into Saskatchewan early in the pandemic. This is now Saskatchewan's turn to rely on that assistance. And so the fact that we were able to move 9 patients out to Ontario is incredibly helpful to the services that we're providing in our ICU rooms, as are the 6 critical care nurses that the federal government has provided. But ultimately, in the scope of the 135 beds that we are you know, providing for Saskatchewan people, 6 critical care nurses, as appreciated as it is, it doesn't substantially change the service that we're providing. Yeah. So what will help is the 70 critical care nurses that are going to be exiting their training here shortly, provincially trained here in Saskatchewan, coming into the system. That will have a substantial effect on supporting our frontline healthcare workers that are providing that care.
Right, and do we have any understanding of the logistics here? Where are they going? When are they getting there? How many beds are being added? The likely no beds are being added for 6 military nurses. I've heard they're going to Regina by an article I had read, but you know, that would be a question that I would ask you to ask at the Emergency Operations Center briefing, and they could provide you some details on actually, you know, where these 6 federal critical care nurses are going, and they might provide you some additional details on the 60 or 70 critical care nurses that we have that are being trained and will be available in the days and weeks ahead.
Last week, the Teachers Federation launched a call saying that the education system is as broken as the healthcare system, and they are saying that teachers are now doing contact tracing. How are you going to be helping teachers right now in this difficult situation?
So, first, throughout last year and then actually trailing into this year, we had provided, alongside with the federal government, about $155 million to school divisions to support their COVID initiative. Some of that has been pulled into this year as well. You're correct. Some time ago, there was some contact tracing. When we, on July 11th, when we had removed the emergency order in Saskatchewan, all of our healthcare workers then went back to provide the services that they normally do, and that meant many of our contact tracers then went back to provide you know, the services across the healthcare system that they do. Since signing the emergency order, we've brought a number of those folks back in to support the contact tracing, and we've been looking at privately procuring companies as well to support the contact tracing efforts in Saskatchewan. And so I respectful of the opinion of the Saskatchewan Teachers Federation, but that contact tracing effort through public and as well as through privately procured contact tracers is ramping up and has been over the course of the last number of months.
Last question?
Premier, you said you got active sooner, and as my colleague here says, it's been about 100 deaths between July 11th or so. That will be your legacy when it comes to this pandemic. Can I get your thoughts on that?
Well, I think when you look at this pandemic as Saskatchewan, you know, we'll leave legacy talk out of any of this for any leader. But when you look at you know, how Saskatchewan has faced this pandemic on many fronts, we have had yes, a very challenging fourth wave here in this province. Very challenging fourth wave that has impacted families across the province. We have put in place significant health measures that are now having a very positive impact on lowering our COVID numbers here in the province, down 45% on our seven-day average. And so we are starting to chart a course through the fourth wave, ultimately, of this pandemic. But we were just here today, you know, talking about what's been going on in the province while we have been, you know, battling this pandemic for some 20 months now, not just in Saskatchewan and Canada, but around the world. And Saskatchewan is faring very well with respect to, you know, ultimately the investment that we are seeing coming into this province, the opportunity that is going to provide to the people that live here today, and ultimately, you know, our next generation that may have the opportunity to choose to live here and have a career and have a job here. You know, we just announced here today, and we have over the course of the last number of months, over $10 billion in investment that ultimately is going to provide opportunity and jobs for Saskatchewan people. And so there is, you know, much going on in the province. First and foremost is how we, you know, manage our way through what has been a very challenging, you know, fourth wave of COVID-19. But there's some positives. Very much, there are some large positives that are happening in Saskatchewan. And I would say as we look, you know, ahead through this fourth wave into the months and ultimately the years ahead, Saskatchewan is very well poised to, you know, continue to provide the world what the world needs. You know, the food, the fuel, the fertilizer, and ultimately creating opportunity for Saskatchewan people. And so, but we've talked about you know, the initiatives that we have done and continue to do to support our nurses on the front line. You know, we talked. Pardon me?
They say it's not enough. They say they need more help.
Well, you know, and you know, when we made a request to the federal government, they provided 6 critical care nurses. I would agree. We're appreciative of that, but it isn't enough to make a significant difference when we already have 480 nurses that are on the ground. That's why we've been, you know, retraining a number of our nurses, increasing their level of training. About 70 of them will be available in the days and weeks ahead to come in and support, you know, our nursing complement that are in our ICUs with that critical care capacity. And so, you know, we are making every effort that we can. Significant public health measures I introduced again in the middle of September that are driving our case numbers down. Pardon me, sorry, I was talking there.
Frontline healthcare workers, those measures, frontline healthcare workers say those aren't sufficient. So I'm keep touting the economic success of the province going forward, but none of that helps the main challenge facing the province.
70 nurses, 70 ICU nurses coming in to support the 480 that we have working there, I think is a significant number. The 6 federal ICU nurses that we have requested and the federal government has graciously provided, you know, are going to support those workers. We've moved, as I said, you know, 9 patients out to Ontario, relying on our provincial colleagues and the province of Ontario to care for those patients. And, you know, all of this is relieving some of the pressure. Ultimately, as we move forward, it's the public health measures, the increase in vaccination rate that are going to relieve that pressure on a longer term basis. The introduction of additional, you know, gathering sizes, restrictions, things of that nature, really don't do anything to, you know, find our way through COVID in the longer term. They're a stopgap measure, but we do have some of those measures in place as well. For example, the masking mandate. Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.